Hi, and welcome to a huge retrospective look at two games I feel very mixed about. These are 2013's Pokémon X and Y for the Nintendo 3DS, and I promise I have several very good reasons for titling this video Pokémon X and Y, Where Nostalgia Ends. Before we go on though, what are Pokémon X and Y? I mean, I'm assuming you know what Pokemon is because you clicked in this video, but I know a good few diehard Pokemon fans who initially skipped out on these two and who, to this day, still have never given them a shot. As far as mainline games go, that means these two, along with the Generation 3 remakes Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, make up what is called Generation 6. Until Sun and Moon, the start of the 7th generation, was announced, I remember hearing rumors everywhere about a Pokemon Z, a third version to go with X and Y that would hopefully add a bunch of content, focus on the legendary Pokemon Zygarde, and just make the Kalos region feel a bit more fleshed out, because, as I'll get into later, this region always came off as feeling somewhat incomplete and even a little empty at points to me. I'm not sure if it ever was confirmed, but I remember seeing YouTube's talk about, yeah, Z is in development, but it got scrapped and had its content shoved into Sun and Moon. That's why there's a random Zygarde quest in those games. But you know what, that's not the focus of today's video. No, see, X and Y were games I was hugely excited for, and back in the day I did actually rather enjoy them, even if I had my fair share of criticisms, even as a dumb teenager. And I'll be going over what I liked and what I had issues with while replaying them earlier this year today. But being one of my retrospectives, there's a deeper, more personal layer to all of this. I feel like I've always been more critical of X and Y than most of the other games in the series, and I think there are two factors at play here with that. First off, these are often called the first ever fully 3D Pokémon RPGs, and if we're talking handheld games, sure, I'll give them that. But the first Pokémon game I ever owned, and yes, I know this is a weird one, but the first one I ever owned was Pokémon Colosseum on the GameCube. That was a fully 3D Pokemon RPG with a story mode where you could catch and battle Pokemon. You could even steal other people's Pokemon, or at least evil shadow Pokemon. I guess it was kind of up to you to determine which ones were evil enough to be worth stealing. Kind of judge and jury there, huh? Anyways, whether you love that game, hate it, or consider it nothing more than an odd spinoff, or find it to be really kind of something charming, if a bit odd, like I do, it at the very least deserves a title of First 3D Pokemon RPG, right? But maybe that's just me being a pedantic fangirl who wants to show her favorite console as much as possible. Now, I want to address the title of this video directly, Where Nostalgia Ends. I feel like there's a very clear split in how I look back on Pokemon as a whole. There's how I look back at generations 1 through 5, particularly gens 4 and 5 as I played the absolute hell out of those, and then there's how I look back at everything after. That's not to say there's anything inherently wrong or that the soul of the series died after Gen 5 or whatever. I mean, there's certainly a start of some concerning trends in the series that continue for years to come, and that started in X and Y, but I'll talk about those later. And yeah, I definitely like a lot of those earlier games better. I mean, here's a shocking opinion that no one on YouTube has ever had before. Pokemon Sword and Shield didn't do much for me. But let's look back at when X and Y came out, along with the games that came directly before them, Pokémon Black 2 and White 2. Now I could do a whole video on why I adore Black 2 and White 2 so much, from a massive Pokemon selection to some tastefully done fan service in terms of the Pokemon World Tournament, to a story that, though not as engrossing as in Black 1 and White 1, was ridiculous enough that I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, goodness, look at this, that's just an ice laser. What I think is most key here, though, is that compared to Black 1 and White 1, Unova felt like a really fleshed out region here with lots of nooks and crannies to explore, and these games are what made this region become my favorite one in all of Pokemon. Now in North America, Black 2 and White 2 came out in June of 2012, and that's important because that was the summer before my freshman year of high school. And like so many video games, I got this game before going on a vacation. Specifically, I got my copy of Black 2 before my family hopped on a flight from Houston, where I spent a huge portion of my childhood, to Victoria, BC, where funnily enough I ended up spending most of my adult life. A new game to play on my DSi, 6 and some hours of flight broken up by a layover in Calgary, and a new pair of headphones too, so I was totally immersed in this game for hours on end, all during my last ever summer before starting high school. Fast forward over a year to October 2013, and we get to the release of Pokémon X and Y. These games were supposed to be a great new leap for the series, the first Pokemon titles to be released on the same day worldwide, being fully 3D on a handheld, character customization, fucking benches, y'all. There is also this new mysterious feature called Mega Evolution, which would give certain Pokemon a new evolutionary stage by attaching a special stone to them, though it could only be activated on one Pokemon per battle, and it was a temporary thing that would revert after the battle. I remember it was first announced too. It was just through a leaked image of this guy, Mega Mewtwo Y. I remember for a hot minute, Facebook blew up about this new Mewtwo for the 2010s. And yeah, Facebook, that's what my main social media site was at the time. And everyone was like, oh damn, Mew 3 is here! Mew 3 is here! Oh, this was the last in the long line of Mew 3 announcement hoaxes. Is hoax the right term here? Maybe just misunderstanding? I think people were expecting Mew 3 to become a thing ever since that Pokemon Chaos Black ROM hack was first put onto a cartridge and started being sold at flea markets and went weirdly, I guess, not viral, but you know, if you were in certain circles, you heard about it. But no, this was just one of Mewtwo's 2 Mega Evolution forms. And yeah, he had 2, one for X, one for Y. The only other Pokemon to get this treatment was Charizard. And look, I love Mega Charizard X as much as the next person, but yeah, I have an issue of this, and we'll get into that. I actually played through Pokemon X shortly after launch, and I'll be honest, it was fun. Competitive battling was at its strongest ever, especially with the advent of super training, which made it easy to train up your mons for some competitive virtual cockfights. Not to mention how good the online features were. When X and Y Online was at its peak, it was phenomenal. Especially Wonder Trading. I love trading a Caterpie and randomly getting someone's rejected baby Cyndaquil in return. Good times. The game had this graphical vibe that reminds me a lot of some PS1 RPGs, almost like Chrono Cross or something. Not to mention, like in all Pokemon games, the soundtrack kicked some major ass. Especially Anastar City, that's the good stuff. Being the insatiable fangirl that I am, I eventually bought Pokemon Y as well, and then eventually ended up with a Japanese Pokemon X. Why the hell do I own this? 3DS is region locked. This is going to live on a shelf for the rest of my life. But even back in 2013, I knew something was different about X and Y on some deeper level. I don't think I knew the words back then, but something just felt a bit off. And before someone says, oh yeah, but you could also say the same about your gender, but like that was a very different kind of off, okay? Every Pokemon game before X and Y had felt like some huge grand adventure for me. And even once I beat them, I found myself coming back for more, searching for secrets, battling with my friends, trying to catch them all, even though I don't think I ever actually completed a Pokédex in any game until Pokemon Red and Blue were re-released via the 3DS eShop. Maybe it's because my family traveled a lot when I was a kid, but I think there's another reason why X and Y came off feeling like just another RPG to me. When I first played Black 2, I was a teenager, sure, but a really fresh one. While sure, I had friends and such, I definitely still had time to sink into a game like this. X and Y, or I guess specifically X, not so much. By 2013, I was 15, well into high school and involved with extracurriculars and learning how to drive and rocking my iPhone 5. Cause I'm not sure if you know this or not, but I was cool as shit. The point is I had other things I was focusing on. Sure, I played through Pokemon X, more so in short bursts on the weekends before I headed off to do other things, but it was one I played through more akin to games I play as an adult. I'm definitely not saying I was an adult at 15. Hell no, I was a dumbass teenager. But I definitely had a certain childhood nostalgia for the first 5 generations. Yeah, even Red and Blue though. Not until later on when a cousin found his old OG Game Boy, probably around 2008 or so. I guess that stopped with X and Y because, well, I was changing and getting older. That's not the game's fault. However, it does mean that in a way for me, it's where nostalgia ends. Not the feeling of nostalgia in general, no, you always make memories with games and friends as you get older, but kind of that really magical childhood nostalgia feeling, and it's where I first realized that wasn't happening anymore. So yeah, that's literally, for me, where nostalgia ends. I hope that video title drop earned me a subscriber. Before I go off on yet another tangent, let's go through the adventures of Pokemon X and Y proper. Again, specifically X, because that's what I originally played, and somewhat in brief, knock on wood, I just want to get out overall what I liked and disliked. The game starts with Professor Dilf here, who shows you a neat tapestry and lets you put in your name and choose your basic character designs. I know there are more in later games, but you gotta love that X and Y started this trend of giving character customization options instead of the same boy or girl protagonist every time. After a bird flies through your bedroom window, you get up, lament the fact that you own a Wii U, get dressed and go downstairs where your mom tells you that it's time for you to go and get your first ever Pokémon. Oh, and also apparently she's a Rhyhorn racer. Nothing is really done with this piece of information, though there is a Rhyhorn you can sit on outside your house. Neat, I guess. You then leave your peaceful abode in Vanderbilt Town to go through Route 1. That's right, you don't even have a Pokemon, and you need to go one town over to even get started. Ooh, what challenges and trials await us on this route? It's just a straight line? This is utterly pointless. Just make this one big city, come on. Did they just desperately need to up the route count by one? Was something planned for here in the post-game that was cut? Nobody knows! We then arrive in Aquacord Town, and gotta be real, for the first actual town of the game, I quite like it. While there's no formal Pokemon Center or Pokemart, which like in Gen 5 are combined into one building when they appear, there's a lady in the north side of town who can heal you up, and a little side shop that sells Pokeballs and potions. There's even the first of several photo spots, where you can take a picture in front of the local landmarks. Reminds me of a similar feature in Heart Gold Soul Silver. The Kalos region here is based on France, and while I'm definitely no expert in small French villages, I can say as someone who just moved to Europe for work that, yeah, the vibe is on point here. You don't have time to initially take any of that in though. It's time for you to meet your rivals. If you ever played Black and White 1, do you remember Bianca and Charon, your two rivals? They were lovely. They grew and had character development and were really interesting characters. Technically, Black 1 White 1 gave you a third rival as well, and that was N. The man even takes you on a date. What a lad! Well, apparently Game Freak thought what made people like those rivals is that you had a few of them. So in X and Y, you have 4 different rivals. You have a player character based on a gender marker you didn't choose, a girl who looks like the character's hyper little sister but is apparently the same age as the rest of you and not related, a dancing guy, and Trevor. None of them ever get fully developed or really any development at all, and the only two who contribute much of anything at all to your adventure are your main rival, in my case Calum, and the hyper girl, Shauna. The dancer, Tierno, seems to exist solely to fill up lines of dialogue and be incredibly unfunny. Trevor really has nothing to him either, but I always like to imagine he has some sort of tragic backstory. I think it's the eyes. Later on, you also have encounters with Cena and Dexio, who are Professor Sycamore's, that's the Dilf, his assistants. They also have superhero alter egos and appear throughout your adventure, and does this mean that we technically have 6 friendly rivals? Most of these are just excuses to constantly pause your adventure for dialogue and unskippable cutscenes. Let's be real, a lot of this stuff is just self-explanatory. I think the game would have been better off with just Calum here. Okay, and maybe Shauna. I like her design. She can stay. In the first meeting with your friendly rivals, they've brought starter Pokemon for you to pick from on a quest from the professor himself. And they also make you choose a nickname for them to call you. And as you can tell, my sense of humor has not changed since I was 15. I really like the Gen 6 starters designs. For all the other issues I have with this generation, Pokemon design isn't one of them, for the most part. And these starters are all incredibly strong, design-wise. This time around, we have Fennekin, Chespin, and Froakie. Initially, I wasn't big on Froakie, but trust me, it gets way better. Gotta love Greninja, even if that's not who I went for in this run. I remember seeing people complain online that your first rival battle is against a rival who uses a Pokemon that has a type weaker than yours instead of the one that has a type stronger than yours, like in all the previous games. I mean, really, we're complaining about that now? It's a tutorial battle. You're just going to spam scratch and tackle until someone wins. You then head north from Aquacord Town and encounter one of my biggest gripes in Pokemon X and Y. Well, maybe 2 of them, since there's an unskippable catching tutorial. Why was this only ever optional in Gold and Silver? I'm assuming a lot of people who are playing this Pokemon game have played a Pokemon game before. I mean, like, don't take it out entirely. I'm sure some people are new to the series, but come on, at least give me the option to skip it. But no, the bigger issue here is Santaloon Forest. This will lead you from north of Aquacord Town to south of Santaloon City, where the first gym leader resides. Because, you know, it's Pokemon. Collect the 8 gym badges by being the gym leaders and become a Pokemon Master. Well, what if I told you Where Nostalgia Ends has a double meaning? In a lot of the recent Pokemon games, I've noticed a huge amount of banking on nostalgia for earlier games, particularly the original Generation 1 Pokemon games. Why would Game Freak do that? Isn't that lazy and takes resources away from creating new exciting things? And the answer is yes. but as long as you keep buying Pokemon games and nostalgia keeps selling more copies, it's unlikely they'll stop. I don't know if this is still an issue in Scarlet or Violet, by the way. I haven't played those yet, and I don't think I'm overblowing things in saying this. Ever since X and Y, Game Freak has really been pandering to Gen 1 nostalgia to sell copies. When Sword and Shield came out, a massive deal was made about the champion Leon having a Charizard. Isn't he so cool with his Charizard? It's the only one that had a Gigantamax form until the DLC of the Gen 1 starters, I mean. In Gen 7, there were the Alolan form Pokemon, which all just so happened to be new forms of Gen 1 Pokemon. Thankfully, we got more variety in regional forms, starting with Sword and Shield and going into Pokemon Legends Arceus. And back in X and Y, we got Pikachu now has a special voice clip when it's announced ever traditional cry. The only legendary Pokemon outside of the Virgin legendaries are Mewtwo and legendary birds from Gen 1. When you reach Lumio City, Professor Sycamore gives you a Gen 1 starter. You also get given a Lapras later on for free, hey, kinda like in Gen 1. For some reason, Charizard and Mewtwo get 2 different Mega Evolution forms. I know they were the fan favorites back in Gen 1, but come on. It all comes off as feeling like a way to tap into that Gen 1 nostalgia that a lot of folks have. Maybe, at the expense of X and Y having their own identity. And this all begins here in Santaloon Forest. Instead of coming up with a unique layout for the first dungeon of the game, they instead decided to copy and paste the layout of Red and Blue's Viridian Forest verbatim. Oh, but not the encounter table, no. In the original games, Pikachu is a rare encounter here. In X and Y, Pikachu is everywhere. And yeah, I did catch one. Look, I might not actually care for the design of Pikachu, but I love me some Raichu. Bitching aside, let's talk about Santaloon City. I have no real issues with this place. There's the first clothing shop of the game, specializing in hats. The city has a really pleasing kind of rocky aesthetic. That's not the right term, but you know, it looks like a nice old town. There we go. Gym has a spiderweb look and gimmick to it, and the first gym battle is respectable as far as first gym battles go. I really dig that gym leader fight theme too. I may or may not occasionally put this theme on to pump me up while cleaning the house. The only very major issue here is a very obvious progression block that stops you from grinding in one of the nearby routes. I guess that's not too bad though, since you can go east of the city and train on Route 22, which goes from east of Santaloon City to Victory Road, or at least the entrance to it, since an NPC is blocking it. I know Pokemon games have always been rather linear, well for the most part, but X and Y also gives you about as much leeway to explore as a single track railway. Route 22 also introduces us to one of my biggest problems with not only X and Y, but most of the newer Pokemon games from the past decade. See this track and field looking area at the top of the route? That's supposed to be the Rhyhorn racetrack. You know, for Rhyhorn racing, that thing that your mom does for a living. Your family's kind of known for it. When I initially found this, I was like, oh, I bet there's a mini game or something in there. The whole aesthetic reminded me of the Pokéathlon from HGSS. Maybe I'd even be able to train up Rhyhorns a la Chocobos in Final Fantasy VII or Chao in Sonic Adventure 2 and race the hell out of them. The only issue, there's zero possible way to get into that racetrack. No minigames, no area to explore, it's just in the background of this random route, and there are a lot of points where cool looking places exist in X and Y for no other reason than just to be a route or town decoration. It's a massive issue with X and Y, and it only got worse as the later gens came out. Sun and Moon was pretty bad about it, and then Sword and Shield got to a point where it feels like the majority of some areas are out of reach for you as a player. Winden sucks. In the Black and White titles, it was amazing how much random extra stuff there was to do and explore. Want to ride a Ferris wheel? Sure. Take a train to an entire town that exists solely to flesh out the railways? Sure. Find entire new areas, caverns, and things to do by revisiting route after route after acquiring new HMs or reaching a new part of the story? You bet. X and Y, in contrast, feels so much more shallow, and it all starts here with this inaccessible Rhyhorn racetrack. Multiple parts of the game have bodies of water, whether they be lakes, ponds, or sea access, that you can't surf or fish on. There are these really cool power plant and lab looking places on the desert route, but those are completely inaccessible. And I know I'm skipping around a bit, but near the end of the game you end up in Coraway Town. This town is only really notable for a couple of reasons. First off, you fight against Professor Sycamore himself there. Neat. It's actually one of 2 battles you have against him in the game. And second, for the post-game, it's near Terminus Cave, where you can catch Zygarde. That's actually a pretty good dungeon, not gonna lie. But what always bugged me about this town is this train station. As I mentioned earlier, Kalos is based on France. You probably already knew this, what with the Eiffel Tower appearing in all the concept art and whatever. And thanks to this, Kalos has its own equivalent to the high-speed TGV trains found throughout France. However, the Kalos TGV train equivalent only has one line. Once you beat the Pokemon game, you can take the train to one of two post-game exclusive areas, Kalos City. This is where the Battle Maison is, this game's equivalent to the Battle Tower. It's okay. This town also has a Friend Safari, which is a neat Street Pass-based version of the Safari Zone. Did anyone else ever actually use Safari Zone? It was actually somewhat of a thing where I was at in high school. There's also a post-game super boss fight against your rival, and there's a stats judge there who can help you with IV breeding. If that last bit makes zero sense, it's okay, because competitive Pokemon is wild and complex enough to keep you up at night. Yeah, it's a thing. The other post-game area is just a single-room cave where you can fight Mewtwo, by the way. Oh wow, they even call it the Unknown Dungeon. That's another one for the Gen 1 callback tally. Where were we before I went off in that tangent? Oh yeah, train station Corway Town. It's never used. Like, it doesn't even show up in a cutscene when you take the train from Lumio City to Kalos City, which I guess makes sense because it's so out of the way. Why is this here? There were rumors back in the day of this leading to a whole new side of the region in a Pokemon Z if it ever came out, or being a spot where you would encounter a legendary Pokemon in an online event, or even when Sword and Shield were still in development, that those games' regions' underused rail lines would connect to Kalos in the post-game. But none of this came to pass, and so it just exists here as yet another part of the game that ultimately serves zero purpose, and that pisses me off. I'm getting very fired up about these children's RPGs. Back to the first gym. After beating Voila, the first gym leader, or maybe it's Viola, I don't know, we're given one of X and Y's most contentious items, the EXP share. Now, the EXP share is an item that has appeared in some form in every generation of Pokemon. In generations 2 through 5, you attach to a Pokemon, and they'd gain experience points after surviving a battle, even if they didn't fight. However, back in Generation 1, the EXP share was actually called the EXP All, which gave EXP to every member of your party when it was activated and you finished a battle. And X and Y, they made it work pretty similar to Gen 1 again. I know, technically when I put it like that, it sounds like another one for the Gen 1 nostalgia tally count, but hey, I actually like this change. On one hand, I can definitely see the arguments from those who claim that this change makes these already easy games easier, because yeah, X and Y are easy, even by Pokemon standards, but on the other hand, one of the best parts of Pokemon is experimenting with new creatures and toying around with your team. Do you know what makes team experimentation hard? Grinding. The EXP share heavily cuts down grinding. As such, I actually find this to be a really welcome change. And look, if you don't like it, you can turn it off. Anyways, they also made another change. Now whenever you catch Pokemon, you gain experience now as well. Neat. At the end of Route 4, we get our first encounter of Cena and Dexio, and they pretty much just exposition dump. I swear the next half hour of the game is just cutscene after cutscene as you talk to these two, get escorted through the gate into Lumio City, meet Professor Sycamore in person, have a battle, get a Pokemon, oh look, a Kanto starter, and meet some other people. By the end of the sequence, I was just constantly mashing the A button, trying to get out of Lumio City as fast as possible to Route 5. I do have a few quick notes on Lumio City though. Now, despite Lumio City being the largest city to ever appear in a Pokemon game, like seriously, this thing has more Pokemon centers than I can count, right now we can only explore a tiny sliver of it. Yeah, apparently there's been a power outage. Wait, what? No, that's a load of bullshit. See, whenever you talk to these construction dudes who don't let you go into certain sections of the city, NPCs are just walking past them. What the hell is this? Second off, this here is Lysander. You haven't encountered them yet, but he's the leader of the evil Team Flare. You can tell he's a bad guy because he's wearing black and ominous music plays when he shows up. Very subtle, Game Freak. Good job. You get a gold star. Third, this is Diantha. She's a movie star and also apparently the champion. She's very underutilized and I don't really have much to say about her. I could see her being a gym leader or something, but I don't know. I'm kind of underwhelmed with her as a champion. I honestly expected Sycamore to be the champion here. It feels kind of built up. I mean, you do battle the guy twice and he's kind of a constant fixture on your adventure. On a more positive note, whoa, look at these roller skates. I should get these back in Santaloon City, but I more so associate these with Lumio City and the following Route 5 since it has some skate park-esque areas to play around in. Good route. While X and Y do have your usual running shoes and you later get a bike, after Santaloon City, you also get the option to move around on roller skates by just moving with the 3DS circle pad instead of the D-pad. So the default makes you default to walking or running, circle pad is skates, and the bike is either registered to select if you so choose, or it can just be activated from the menu. I actually really like the roller skates and I wish they came back in a later game. They give you a full range of movement that isn't confined to an 8-directional grid and move you around faster than running as well. X and Y have a fairly dynamic camera system, so a lot of the game features views from different heights and angles, and that's for better or worse. In Lumio City, this is done in such a way that this becomes the perfect spot for Pokemon breeding, particularly around this outer ring road. Let me explain. Over on Route 7 is the Pokemon Daycare, where you can breed your Pokemon. Make a mommy Pokemon, a daddy Pokemon, love each other very much, and pop out an egg you have to hatch by walking around. In late 2016, when I was both getting to my first year of university and preparing for Sun and Moon to launch, I decided to try my hand at getting really into breeding in X and Y. Doing stuff for all that competitive battling stuff that I won't go into because honestly, if I wanted to, there's an entire other video there. And to breed a competitive team, especially if you want them to be shiny, you need to hatch a ton of eggs. So here's Jamie's unofficial Stuff We Play guide to hatching a ton of eggs in Pokemon X and Y really fast. Step 1, get a Pokemon with the Flame Body ability. One of my favorite mons introduced into X and Y is Talonflame. It evolves from Fletchling, which initially seemed like this generation's equivalent to Pidgey and nothing more. However, I was horribly wrong here. Talonflame is a fantastic fire flying type that I use on most runs of X and Y, and it just so happens it can also get Flame Body. And yeah, flying type, so you can use the Fly HM. By the way, HMs are in this game? I don't really mind them here. Now, going back to Flame Body has two effects. In battle, if you're hit directly by a move, you have a 30% chance of afflicting your opponent with the burn status, which on its own is pretty good, pretty helpful. Outside of battle though, Flame Body halves the number of steps needed to hatch an egg. So step 2, after you've put Talonflame at the front of your party, get your eggs from the daycare. Breed whatever you want. As always, use a shiny Ditto trade from a regional version of the game different than your own because that's how the folks on Poke Community said I could become cool. And finally, step 3, go to the main ring road around Lumio City, hop on your roller skates, and use a rubber band to forcibly hold your circle pad in a direction. Yes, I know it will kill your 3DS in the long run, but it will make you start skating around in circles, and all you have to do at that point is just check in every few minutes to press the A button to go through an egg hatching cutscene, fly back to the daycare if need be to get more eggs, and fill the time in between by watching more of my YouTube videos or something. I hope you found that interesting because past Route 5, X and Y gets a bit boring for a bit. The next town is Camphor Town, which initially looks pretty neat. Look, it has a medieval city wall and even a castle. But the castle is completely empty. Wow, what a complete and utter waste of time that's never brought up again. The route afterwards then diverges into two paths. One goes northwest along Route 6 towards Parfum Palace, another goes directly west along this unsurfable river. And when I first saw this bit on the map, I thought, ooh, look, an optional route. No, that's not the case. These games love railroading you. See, there's a sleeping Snorlax blocking the way around Route 7, and the only way you can get him to wake up is by getting a Pokeflute from the palace. That's another tick for the Gen 1 reference tally. Route 6 is deceptively boring. Towards Parfum Palace, it's just a straight tree-covered path lined with trainers, but coming back the other way, it actually has two maze-like sections off to the sides that you can explore, complete with additional trainers and items. Parfum Palace itself is okay. I like the vibe and aesthetic. Don't care for trying to hunt down this rich douchebag's dogs. The fireworks cutscene here is nice though. Young lesbians in love. Heading back to Route 7, we wake up the Snorlax, go past a berry farm, and arrive at a connecting cave. The only thing of note here is that later on you can actually make this into a direct link between Silage City, home of the second gem, and this route. For now though, we go through it, fight some Zubat, and start going the long way around. That means go through the cave, down Route 8 to Ambret Town, divert through Route 9 to check out the Glittering Cave, back to Ambret Town, down to South Beach portion of Route 8, and then to Silage City. The first time I played X, the whole sequence had me pretty hyped. Gap between the first and second gyms is huge, like multiple hours long. Between Santaloon City and Silage City you go through, I shit you not, 6 routes, 2 of them twice, 3 full towns, and 2 dungeons. 3 if you consider Parfum Palace anything more than a distraction. I was just thinking, wow, just imagine if this is the same scope the rest of the game has. Huge treks from gym to gym with potentially huge massive varieties and environments and Pokemon selection. That would be revolutionary for the series. Unfortunately, that's not the case. These are not 100+ hour games. Once we hit Silage City, we go back to the standard Pokemon fare of having a gym in every other city or town, or every city and town at points, for the rest of the adventure. At least the gym gimmicks are cool here. Silage has rock climbing, Shallower City has skating shenanigans, and Laverre City even has a creepy dollhouse. Nice. On that note, the Kalos Pokédex is so big, it's divided into 3 sections, with 450 total Pokemon being catchable in the region. That's even more than the base version of Sword and Shield, period. And yet, I don't know, Black 2 and White 2 feel like they have more variety and like the region is a little more lively. Maybe it's because you get hit with a ton of different types of Pokemon from different generations early on there. Like when I play Black 2, I usually end up with like a Mareep and a Riolu along with my starter by the time I hit the second gym. You can even go and get like a Magnemite or a Magby or something. While X and Y start introducing more Mon variety as you go on. For the first bit, it feels like you get some new stuff, a lot of Gen 1 Pokemon, and little else. So sure, while on the whole there are more Pokemon available to you by the time you beat the game, they aren't spaced out the best. What I do find interesting though is Route 9. Instead of traversing on foot, you actually get to ride in the back of a Rhyhorn, which can break certain blocks. Why couldn't we see a racetrack full of these things? Anyways, this is one of a few different rideable Pokemon in X and Y. Later on we get to be carried around by a Mamoswine, explore a farm on a Go-Go, and wonder why Lapras gets an exclusive surfing model but none of the other water types do. Route 9 leads us to Glittering Cave, which for its first section actually has this pretty neat first-person perspective. This was shown off a lot in trailers leading up to X and Y, and yeah, I can see why. It's a cool effect and a pretty dungeon. For what X and Y lack in substance, they really did show off the 3DS's graphical capabilities well. I mean, don't play it with the 3D on or the frame rate will tank, but on the whole, Glittering Cave especially looks really wonderful. After that initial first-person section, you then encounter Team Flare. Yeah, they're this game's evil team. They want to destroy the world with a laser while looking stylish. Yeah, that works. They exist, and they're pushovers. After all of this, we also get given one of 2 fossils, which can be revived in Ambrette Town. One gives you the T-Rex Tyrant, another gives you the sparkly long boy Aurorus. That thing. Here's another weird gripe I have with X and Y that might just be a nitpick. X and Y effectively give you nearly a full team of Pokemon, just cuz. If you want, it's possible to beat these games with a team of 5 Pokemon by the end without throwing a single Pokeball. There's your initial starter Pokemon, the Kanto starter you get from Sycamore, Fossil here, a free Lucario that can Mega Evolve in Shallower City, a Lapras right after that, and if you got the game at launch, you could make that a full team of 6 by getting a free Torchic that can Mega Evolve as well. Look, every game has gift Pokemon, the concept of them is fine and all, just in X and Y they kind of get handed out to you and I feel like it's a bit much. Like there's no searching or anything, and they're all rather good Pokemon. And look, maybe I'm just being hard in these games, but it feels a little overboard to me. The only one you have to actually battle to get is Mega Lucario. When you hit Shallower City, you meet the gym leader Karina, and you have to go through some big, seemingly plot important tower dedicated to Mega Evolution. You battle her Mega Lucario with a Mega Lucario you get given to try to prove who's best, and it actually doesn't matter if you win or lose, because you'll get the Mega Ring that lets you use Mega Evolution for the rest of the game, regardless. Should mention, between Silage City and Shallower City is Geosenge Town. It's a crappy Stonehenge knockoff. Oh, and there are also 2 more things along the way between those 2. First off, the Reflection Cave. Really unique dungeon where trainers can only spot you by seeing their reflections in a mirror. Now that's actually a pretty good gimmick. I can get behind that. The second way crappier thing we're introduced to is Sky Battles. This is a gimmick exclusive to Gen 6, involving battles with Pokemon that can fly. That's it. There's a limited number of battles and an even more limited number of Pokemon, and Sky Battles on the whole don't really add much of anything. I feel like the devs saw triple and rotation battles in Gen 5 and were like, ooh, we need to add a new type of battle to Gen 6, something that will end up being used even less than those other 2 did. Perhaps the biggest travesty here is what Sky Battles did to a lot of Pokemon models. Now, a lot of the new X and Y models look pretty good, not gonna lie, but some appear so stiff and lifeless, particularly the ones for Pokemon that can be used in Sky Battles. Instead of making 2 sets of models for these Pokemon, one set for regular battles and one with them flying for Sky Battles, every Sky Battle compatible Pokemon is instead permanently in a flying pose. That means certain flying Pokemon such as Skarmory here just T-pose in the air ad nauseum. Really, you can't even flap those wings a bit? You'd think in Sun and Moon, especially into Sword and Shield, they'd make new poses for them. I mean, the Sky Battle compatible models are huge downgrades from what we'd seen in Pokemon before. Back to the adventure proper though, we beat Karina in Shallower City and head off to Cormarine City. This place features both a monorail and the next gym leader, Ramos, who uses grass types. I can sum up the rest of the game a bit more rapid fire. Head south from Cormarine, desert shenanigans with Team Flare, head back to Lumios, go to the Eiffel Tower, which is also a gym. Hey look, it's Clemon, he appeared in the anime apparently. I don't know, I stopped watching back in Hoenn. Head up to Route 14, chat with your useless rivals, go to a lame ghost house. Ask why this guy is asking for a tip when tipping culture isn't much of a thing in France, or really most of Western Europe for that matter. And then we get to Lavere City, home of the gym with this girl who has these really creepy bug eyes. Also, she specializes in fairy type, which was a new type of Pokemon introduced in X and Y on top of the other 17 in the series. It was the first time a new Pokemon typing was introduced since Gold and Silver back in 1999. And I like fairy types. Their poster child is Sylveon, and Sylveon is a pretty top tier Pokemon. We stan a trans icon. So one more tangent before we get on with the progression summary. To evolve Eevee into Sylveon, you need to actually play with them. Give them some love and affection. That's thanks to Pokemon Me, a new feature to let you play with your Pokemon, pet them, and even feed them treats. Again, let me be clear, X and Y may not be my favorite Pokemon games. In fact, they were my least favorites in the entire series until Sword and Shield, but features like Pokemon Me and Mega Evolution really are pretty cool. Shame about them all getting axed after Gen 7. After beating Valerie in Lavere City, you clear Team Flare out of a Pokeball factory and head down Route 15 to Dendemil Town. Also, hey, we have a Master Ball now. Nice! There's a short detour to the Frost Cave, oh look, ice puzzles, to rescue an Abomasnow, who then carries you through the snow piles of Route 17. If you want though, you can also detour here to Route 16. Gotta wish there were more of this, the whole adventure feels way linear even by Pokemon standards. I mean, not as much as in the next two generations. There are way too many pauses for characters to spew dialogue, particularly your rivals. A lot of it is just so self-explanatory. None of these characters grow or change at all. A lot of what they talk about is the same old shtick every time. We get it, Tierno, you like dancing, hang up the Pokeballs. And Team Flare really doesn't do much for me. And it's a shame too, because when the game does open up and let you explore and go through areas like Route 16, you see that the team here really does, when they are allowed to, I guess, know how to make a decent route. From Route 17, you get to Anastar City. This is where the 7th gym is, home of Olympia, the psychic gym leader. Ooh, fancy camera angles. There's also this big crystal that aids in a Mega Evolution Stone quest in a post-game, and just ignore how that looks. That's caused by how I was recording the game. Uh-oh, did you hear that siren? That's the plot alarm. It seems that we've spent so much time doing standard Pokemon fare that we forgot the plot was eventually going to catch up with us. It seems that Team Flare has captured this guy, AZ, who's a 3,000-year-old king with lots of trauma. He tried to make a thing to live forever with his flower pal and then turned it into a giant death laser and started a deadly war. And now Lysander wants to revive that death laser. And to do that involves reviving the version legendary. Ooh, Xerneas or Yveltal. I actually really like these mons. Xerneas more so. That's why I chose X. So we go through a base hidden under a cafe in Lumio City, fight Lysander, see some shit go down TV, in Geosenge Town, go to Geosenge Town, go through a lab, fight a gauntlet of grunts, awaken the legend, throw your Master Ball, and fight Lysander one more time, and this time he even Mega Evolves, and still goes down fairly easily. Stupid Gyarados couldn't even fight right. Hey, other folks who played X and Y, was anyone else kind of put off by how relatively small trainer parties stay? All of the gym leaders only have 2 or 3 Pokemon on their team even at the end of the adventure. Lysander in his final fight only has 4. Even all of the Elite 4 members only have 4 Pokemon each, even in rematches. I'm sure some of these fights can get fairly challenging towards the end, but why the slim down party sizes? I mean, to be fair, for as much as I love Gen 5, it had a similar issue, especially in Black 2 and White 2. But in the first 4 gens, it wasn't uncommon to find trainers with 5 Pokemon each by the time you reached the endgame. In X and Y though, even in Victory Road, the majority of trainers only use a couple of Pokemon max. I don't know, I just always found it a bit weird. Anyways, with Lysander down and the day saved, it's time to head through Route 18 Corway Town, a Sycamore fight, and Route 19 to Snowbell City. Here we're off to fight the final gym leader, the Ice-type master, Wolfrit. And I gotta say, I love this guy's design. That man looks like he gives a hell of a bear hug. He's also one of the few gym leaders that you actually get to interact with outside of the gym. I think the only others are Karina and Shalor City and Clamont and Lumiose City. For Wulfric, you actually have a full-on mini-quest through the spooky forest in Route 20 to the Pokemon Village, which is a Pokemon preserve of sorts where Wulfric volunteers. It's also where Mewtwo's little cave is located in the post-game. After talking with Wulfric, we go back to Snowball City to take on the gym. The final gym isn't too bad, but it actually is pretty fun. I like the sliding puzzle and I dig Wulfric's team, even if by this point, my team was well-rounded enough to make quick work of him. Afterwards, it's time to go down Route 21 and through Victory Road. There's a final rival battle and some good strength puzzles here, and some really pumping music as well. For all of X and Y's other issues, particularly in a lot of the other dungeons, which most of the time just feel generic or like hallways, this is a nice final gauntlet that helps pump you up for the end of the game. The Elite Four proper are also pretty good difficulty-wise, even with the slimmer than usual teams for Elite Four fare. Like in Gen 5, you can fight them in any order, you have to fight them all one after another with no chance to go to a Poke Center or Mart, and each of them have really badass introductions and cutscenes. I've said it before and I will happily say it again, especially for a game out only 2 years into the 3DS's lifespan, X and Y really show off the system's graphical power at times. I mean, it's not impressive in the grand scheme of things. I think a lot of Coliseum XD look technically better, but damn it, the game has some really pretty moments, and a lot of people were impressed at the time, myself included. Once we take down the E4, we reach the champion, Diantha, and she's no Lance or Iris, that's for sure. Do you know what I'm saying, Pokemon fans? Let me know in the comments below. But yeah, she's the third trainer you encounter all game who can Mega Evolve, and during my playthrough for this video, I was worried her Mega Gardevoir was going to give me some serious trouble. I was very mistaken. But wait, there's one last thing we have to do. Remember that story I glossed over because I thought it was generic at best? Well, as a thank you for saving the Kalos region, the regional government or whoever is in charge of things decides to host a ceremony to thank you. This plays out after you beat Diantha, and they make a point to give you and all four of your useless rivals equal credit. I don't know, I can see maybe giving like Caleb and Shauna a little bit of credit since they actually did something. But Trevor and Dance Dance Revolution here, these two contributed practically nothing to the adventure, and exist solely to be two more models that Game Freak happened to make for this game and felt obligated to use. The fact that they're here for this ceremony detracts from the whole thing. I'm not really upset. Look, this might be a video essay looking at a video game I first played at 15 that was aimed at kids, and I know there are bigger issues in the world, but I gotta be honest, it still annoyed me, and if I have to talk about the games, I'm gonna bring it up. The final thing that happens before the credits roll is that you get to fight AZ. So I guess there's that. It's not a hard fight, but it's actually pretty cool, since AZ ended up being the one character I found quite interesting, particularly with his backstory. I really wish the devs leaned more into using him or things associated with him to flesh out Kalos more, make it feel more like a region with its own identity. I mean, hell, when you beat him, he's actually reconnected with his flower pal because he's found his will to live again and actually hits a little bit. On the whole though, as it stands, the Kalos region feels like a generic Pokemon region with a vaguely French coat of paint on it. Sun and Moon at points had the same flaw, but overall at least felt like they stood more on their own and had some neat places to look at, even if they had some of the route and town design issues I mentioned here. But then Sword and Shield came out, and we were back to the same problem we had here, just swap out France for England. I think that's my biggest problem with X and Y. They're well-made games, sure, and being a full 3D Pokemon game on a handheld made them stand out in 2013, but nearly a decade later, what makes them stand out now? A good friend of mine once described X and Y as solid but not standout titles, and I think that really is a great way to describe them. And if you disagree, that's fine. A buddy of mine loves these games and calls them his favorite in the series, and though I don't see what he sees, I both respect his opinion and acknowledge that there's at least fun to be had. But also, for every step forward X and Y had, there was also a step back. The games were fully 3D on a handheld, but we got Sky Battle afflicted models. We got cool new Pokemon forms in the form of Mega Evolutions, which were only expanded on in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but there is an over-reliance on Gen 1 fan favorite Pokemons, and Mega Evolution itself was unceremoniously axed from the series after Gen 7. A lot of the new Pokemon designs are great, but the story was bare bones and generic. It could have really been improved on that beefed up Pokemon Z updated re-release we never got. And of course, some of the cutscenes and locales are gorgeous, especially by 3DS standards, but some routes and towns have aesthetically beautiful features that are either devoid of content or completely uninteractable by the player. And again, please ignore this graphical glitch in Anastar City. It's just caused by how I'm having to record gameplay, and in the actual game it's really quite beautiful to look at. Perhaps most egregiously, X and Y felt like a start to a new era for the series. Sprite-based Pokemon games were done with and went out with a bang in Gen 5. And you had two very different game choices there too. Do you want Black 1, White 1, which feature exclusively new Pokemon until the post-game? Or Black 2 and White 2, which feature a massive variety of Pokemon to use from across the series, and that starts at the very start of the game. X and Y may have a bigger regional Pokédex in those games, but they feel more tethered to Gen 1. Specific love given to Gen 1 favorites, Gen 1 starters, and Lapras given out just cuz in the middle of the adventure, the Snorlax segment, Mewtwo's fought in a place called the Unknown Dungeon, some moves such as Hyper Beam and Psychic use their Gen 1 sound effects, Pikachu's that special voice clipper appears, much like in Pokemon Yellow, and must I again mention Santaloon Forest being a straight rip of Viridian Forest? And maybe I'm nitpicking, and if you feel that way, that's fine. But I'm entitled to my opinion. I know most of that stuff I just mentioned, I talked about at several points earlier in the video, and if it felt a little redundant, so did seeing Viridian Forest again. That's not to say that new Pokemon titles shouldn't be allowed to have any references to past games. To mention Black 2 White 2 one more time, the Pokemon World Tournament was a huge homage to fans by featuring all the gym leaders and champions from throughout the series up to that point. But also, it was completely optional and limited to the post-game. Most of the references I mentioned from X and Y are very in your face. But even outside of that, Kalos feels like it's missing something to me. Maybe it's the unused rail line or the inaccessible areas. Maybe it's the overabundance of rivals and the abundance of characters who feel just not fleshed out in the slightest. And maybe it's the weird pacing. I don't think these are bad games. Again, I just don't think they're particularly great games either. Before someone mentions it, yeah, there are other aspects of X and Y, bad and good, that I haven't mentioned today. Like that you only get one legendary bird per playthrough, and that you have to chase the damn thing across the region to even get a chance at fighting it. It's annoying. On the flip side though, the post-game has a mini-story in Lumio City where you get to partner up with International Detective Looker. And I gotta be real, I enjoyed this, and I thought this was a really fun little mini episodic adventure. I wish there was more of Kalos to actually explore though, especially in the post-game. Like, a singular town? Really? Like, it's more than Sword and Shield, I'll give it that, not counting DLC. But remember back when Pokemon games would give you an entirely new region to explore? Or at least half a region? Or even an island area that was basically a mini region? X and Y, on the whole, are just okay. If you played all the Pokemon games that came before them, then sure, maybe dive in if this looks somewhat interesting to you. I think there's fun to be had. I've said that countless times. But if you started with X and Y or only played the games that came after them, I implore you to go back and play the earlier stuff. Platinum, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and both sets of Black and White games are all some of my favorites. And all of the Game Boy Advance entries rock as well, especially Emerald. So thanks for sitting down and listening to this long ramble about these 3DS games for me. I tried to be as balanced as I could while also bringing in my own experiences and memories. X and Y really did come in at an odd and transformative time in my life. Is that the right word? Changes were happening, that's what I'm saying. And looking back, I want to know, when did you start feeling like that sense of childhood nostalgia or childhood wonder that video games brought you wasn't really happening anymore? I'm guessing for me, it was at some point between 2012 and 2013. And it's why for me, I'm comfortable calling this pair of Pokemon games Where Nostalgia Ends.